It goes down smoother.
Now it's time for Toker Talk Radio, the voice of the marijuana nation.
What are you people? On dope?
Where you can toke.
I inhale frequently.
Or you can talk.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
Or you can toke and talk.
10 federal criminal penalties for possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana.
While we talk about toke on Toker Talk Radio.
So, by the way, when it comes to pot, if you're 40 years old, you live in a log cabin in Oregon, you got 12 giant pot plants in your backyard, have a ball.
Live from beautiful Portland, Oregon at Rolla J Studios.
Hey, this is great. Just like cannabis.
Plus your calls live at 971-533-7111.
They're walking on their pants with their cap on backwards, listening to Enema Man and Snoopy Poop Dog.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel? Gateway theory doesn't work. It's a reality.
Holland, is it real? Don't tease me.
We're locking up people that take a couple of puffs of marijuana, and the next thing you know, they got 10 years.
And now, here's your host, the guru of ganja graphics, the sultan of sativa statistics, and the worst nightmare of a reefer-mad prohibitionist. A polite, perspicacious, productive pothead with a propensity for PowerPoint. Radical Russ Belville.
They asked me to introduce Cheech and Chong. I said, how much? And they said, we don't pay for introductions. So I said, then I don't need this crummy gig. And they said, yes, you do. And I said, ladies and gentlemen, Cheech and Chong.
All right, welcome everyone. 4:02 in the Pacific Time Zone. We made it to the weekend, the last hour of live production here on the Russ Belville Show for the week. It's been a hell of a week, and tomorrow is my birthday. Yes, it's my birthday. We're going to party like it's my birthday, but we shall not be sipping Bacardi like it's my birthday. We need to have a strain that rhymes with arty so that we can change that song. Right? I don't have to talk about sipping Bacardi. Otherwise, I like it. 50 Cent, that's a good tune. On the show today, we're going to talk a little bit more about the Kettle Falls Five case. If you've been following this case, this is the family of five who are all medical marijuana patients who are well within Washington State's medical marijuana law, but they're being prosecuted on a federal level. Jacob Sullivan, our friend out there at Reason.com and on Forbes.com, has been looking into this. He's got a great article up on this. I'm going to read that to you in just a little bit. Also, man, what a great guest we had in the first hour. Sarah Frank from Moms for Marijuana and the Lily Fisher, Fight for Lily Fisher Foundation. Man, they do some real grassroots street activism there. And, I've been an activist for, 10 years now. And I'm always heartened by the techniques and the tactics that grassroots activists come up with, especially when pressed by the lack of budget, right? You got $100,000 to throw around. Sure, you can put up a bunch of billboards. You could put up some radio ads, some TV ads and all that, print ads, try to get the word out. But what do you do when you're, dirt poor and you're just grassroots activists trying to make things happen? Well, what they do, and Sarah briefly mentioned it, was what she called chalk walks. And what it is they go get that big, thick sidewalk chalk that you buy for your kids to draw on the sidewalks, right? And they will go to the county or the city or the state building, whatever it is, where, the courthouse, wherever it might be. They'll go to this place and they will write on the public sidewalks all around the building, fight CPS, learn more. Here's a website. Here's what happened. As all the people walking in to the building, jurors, caseworkers, the public, the media, they see all these messages chalked out on the sidewalks, and they sometimes see people getting into angry discussions over it. And it's just so effective. So I want to recommend that to anyone out there listening. If you're a grassroots organization trying to get the word out, talk to the folks at Fight for Lily Foundation, Fight for Lily Foundation. I think it's Lily, just one, well, 2 L's total. But anyway, maybe it's 3. I don't know. I'm sure Google will tell you. But it's just a great idea, this chalk walking, and it's something I hope that more organizations will take advantage of. Also in the news today, there was the first meeting of the Oregon Liquor Control Commission to discuss marijuana issues. Anthony Johnson from the Measure 91 campaign was at the meeting providing testimony, and we will try to get him on a future show to discuss what went down. I'll be attending some of the legislative meetings, and it's interesting. We've got the Oregon Liquor Control Commission is of course in charge of our marijuana, because of course, why not, right? But anyway, they're in charge of our marijuana, so they'll be coming up with all the administrative rules within the framework of the Measure 91 law. And they're currently engaged in a listening tour. They're going across the state and holding these town hall meetings to listen to what people have to say. One of the most recent ones, and this one's gotten a lot of play on the Oregonian, is they had a meeting up in Pendleton. Now, Pendleton, if you can imagine the state of Oregon, it's on the north, like close to the northern border, damn near in the center. When you drive from Portland to Boise, it's the halfway point. So you're halfway in the middle of Oregon, and it's very, shall we say, crimson-necked. Okay? Cowboy boots, cowboy hats, big old belt buckles kind of place. A lot of ranchers, a lot of farmers, and it's also the home of the Pendleton Roundup, which is a big old rodeo that they throw every year. And so they spoke to some of these folks. These folks showed up at the OLCC meeting, this listening tour, and talked about how upset they were that all them city folk out there in the western side of the state passed these laws that control what happens on the eastern side of the state. And this is, the case because the Portland metro area, the Eugene metro area, and the Salem metro area hold the majority, a large majority, of Oregon's population. You get out there to Pendleton and Burns and all these eastern Oregon places, we're talking about, more cows than people, right? Very sparsely populated. So they're upset in Pendleton about this little thing called democracy, where the majority gets to, decide what the rules are. In their mind, they hate marijuana out there, and they like to point out all these eastern counties overwhelmingly voted no on Measure 91. And so they're upset that the Western way of life has to come out there to the eastern Oregon hinterlands. Well, folks, here's the thing about Measure 91 is it took that into account. Measure 91 gives Pendleton and Burns and all these localities the power to ban pot shops and grows and processors and retailers and wholesalers, all of it. They can ban every bit of marijuana commerce they want, but they got to do it through a vote of the people. You can't just get the Pendleton City Council and get 5 ranchers on a city council vote no. You got to put it on the general election ballot and have the people of Pendleton vote on it. So you do have local control. You've got the local control to ban the marijuana commerce you don't like. What they really have a problem with, though, is the fact they just can't keep marijuana illegal. It's not that they don't like pot shops or grows or anything. They don't like pot heads. They don't like the people. And they're upset they'll no longer get to discriminate against them and harass them and fine them and throw them into jail for enjoying a substance far safer than alcohol. That's what they're upset about, because while they have the local ability to ban the commerce, they cannot criminalize the personal possession and cultivation. Now, the reaction from people in the newspaper commenting on this is pretty overwhelmingly in favor of the concept of these guys making a mountain out of a molehill and throwing stones from a glass house. And the glass house would be the Pendleton Roundup, the big rodeo. At the Pendleton Roundup, there is copious use of alcohol. And it's legendary for drunken beer and whiskey-fueled brawls between dueling cowboys and such. And numerous people in the paper pointed that out, saying, why are they getting their panties all in a bunch over legal marijuana when those people that smoke pot are not going to be any sort of problem? when they preside over a festival of animal abuse that is marked by drunken debauchery and violence among humans. Just a little bit of misplaced priorities, if you ask me.
Jive, marry, grifo, grass, hay. Technically, it's cannabis sativa, the common name, marijuana. She has found a crutch to see her through her difficulties instead of facing up to them and coping with them. And in time, she may be ready to try something different, something better.
Gateway theory doesn't work. It's a reality.
Jive, marry, grifo, jive, marry, grifo, grass, hay.
420 Radio, your ticket to the High Times Cannabis Cups.
Sir, do you think there will or should come a time for us to discuss the possibility of legalization, regulation, and control of all drugs, thereby doing away with the violent criminal market as well as a major source of funding for international terrorism? Thank you so much for your time, Mr. President.
Well, I think this is an entirely legitimate topic for debate.
Name the time and place, Mr. President. Radical Russ has been prepping for this debate full-time since 2005. The Russ Belville Show.
Funky roller ring.
Oh, yeah.
What's happening, Groovy Cats? This is your Funk Master of Ceremonies, Big Daddy. And I want you to join me every Thursday night at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific, right here at the Funky Roller Ring.
Oh, yeah.
Your home of soul, funk, and disco, baby.
Funky-licious.
There's always a party at the Funky Roller Ring.
This is Radical Russ encouraging you to take a look at the Weed Blog every day. Johnny Green and the staff at the Weed Blog are on top of all the latest developments in the fight to end marijuana prohibition nationwide. You can even get the Weed Blog on your smartphone by installing the Weed Blog app for iPhone and Android. If it's about weed, it's on the Weed Blog, including my original writing. So don't delay. Read the Weed Blog today.
Music from Cancer Bats, that's Breathe Armageddon. Some of the great hard rock that you'll hear on the Earth Crasher Flower Hour every Friday night. It's Friday. Every Friday night live at 8 p.m. Pacific time. We'll be there tonight with Herb Thrasher. He's got not one, not two, but three different interview guests that we'll be talking to from various bands and record labels. Check it out later tonight. I'm sorry, folks. I'm having a breakdown or something. I don't know what's going on. My brain is discombobulated. Hit me. I can't talk. Oh, my goodness. Welcome back, everyone. It's almost 14 after the hour, and I wanted to bring you this piece from Jacob Sullum. It's in Forbes magazine. Eager to imprison medical marijuana users, prosecutors hide the truth from jurors. Imagine you're a juror in the federal trial of 5 people charged with growing and distributing marijuana in northeastern Washington. The prosecution cannot present any direct evidence that the defendants sold marijuana to anyone, and the defendants say they were growing all 74 plants for their own personal use. A bit of arithmetic reveals that the total number of plants comes to just under 15 per defendant, which happens to be the presumptive limit for patients under Washington's medical marijuana law. Yet no one says anything about medical marijuana during the trial. What you don't realize is that the defense attorneys have been forbidden to discuss their clients' reliance on Washington's law, since federal law bans marijuana for all purposes. You also do not realize that each of the defendants faces at least 10 years in federal prison because their lawyers are not allowed to talk about that either. and despite your suspicion that the defendants were growing marijuana for medical use, you are told that your job is to determine whether they violated federal law, which they undeniably did. That's the situation jurors will confront when they sit down to hear the evidence against the Kettle Falls Five, whose trial is scheduled to begin on February 23rd in Spokane. Larry Harvey and his co-defendants, his wife, Rhonda Firestack Harvey, Rhonda's son, Roland Gregg, his wife, Michelle Gregg, and a family friend, Jason Zucker, are gambling that at least one juror will figure out what is really going on and vote for acquittal in the interest of justice. Federal law be damned. That is their only hope of avoiding prison, unless a federal judge agrees with defense attorneys that the prosecution is barred by a spending restriction Congress enacted last month, or the feds suddenly decide to drop a case they have doggedly and inexplicably pursued since August of 2012. On the face of it, the Kettle Falls Five case defies Justice Department policy. Since 2009, the Department of Justice has been saying that prosecuting patients who use marijuana in compliance with state law, quote, is unlikely to be an efficient use of limited federal resources, end quote. Deputy Attorney General James Cole confirmed that policy in an August 2013 memo that extended the department's forbearance to state-licensed suppliers of recreational marijuana, provided their activities do not implicate federal enforcement priorities. As a result of this policy, businesses growing far more than 74 plants operate openly throughout Washington, including the very city where the Kettle Falls Five are to be tried, without federal interference. That situation makes the feds' persistent pursuit of the Kettle Falls Five all the more puzzling. By federal standards, this would be a small-time case, even if the defendants were supplying the black market, and there is no real evidence that they were. No customers, no deliveries, no undercover buys, no neighbors reporting suspicious visitors. All five have medical conditions that their doctors said could be treated with marijuana, including gout, osteoarthritis, wasting syndrome, and chronic pain from severe back injuries. They made no attempt to hide their plants, which they grew outside the Harvey's house in a garden marked by flags bearing the green cross symbol for medical marijuana. They clearly strove to stay within the state's presumptive limit of 15 plants per patient, although Washington's law would have allowed them to argue that more was medically necessary. The Kettle Falls Five's lawyers, in a 2014 letter to the Attorney General Eric Holder, said Michael Ormsby, the U.S. Attorney for the Eastern District of Washington, was unimpressed by the evidence of medical use. Quote, in a meeting with the United States Attorney in late 2012, a member of the defense team went to painstaking lengths to explain the exact nature of the defendant's medical marijuana usage. A dual board certified doctor who is internationally recognized as being an expert witness on cannabis as medicine described in detail how the amount and various forms of marijuana seized are clearly indicative of patient consumption. Unfortunately, the U.S. Attorney's Office insists on proceeding with this unnecessary indictment at great expense to the taxpayers and against the Department of Justice's direct orders, end quote. In framing that indictment, prosecutors made sure the defendants would qualify for prison sentences of at least 10 years. Speculating about previous harvests, they charged the Kettle Falls Five with growing a total of at least 100 plants, which triggers a 5-year mandatory minimum. They also noted that the Harveys, like many people in eastern Washington, had guns in their house, which, according to the government, means the defendants possessed firearms in the furtherance of a drug trafficking crime. That qualifies them for another 5 years, and the two sentences must be served consecutively. 3 other charges in the indictment, conspiracy to grow marijuana, distribution of marijuana, and maintaining a place for the purposes of manufacturing, distributing, and using marijuana, could make the defendant's sentences even longer. We'll continue on with this after the break. It's just cruel and unusual for the federal government to be prosecuting this case against the Kettle Falls Five when so clearly their marijuana use was medical in nature and well below the state's requirements for the presumptive use of medical marijuana. Why would the federal government be going after these people? Why would the U.S. Attorney's Office be going after these people when medical and recreational marijuana is run amok in Washington state? Plenty of growers growing far more than 74 plants. And those growers are growing it for sale. Those growers are growing it, some of them, for recreational purposes.
Come and see the violence inherent in the system! Help! Help! I'm being repressed!
Sometimes Liebermater just says it perfectly. The violence inherent in the system, we are being repressed. Hey, it's 4:20. Let's shake off some of that repression here in the West Coast time zone. I hope you got something to enjoy. Herb Thrasher's calling in with the Daily Toker tunes. We'll be right back with some music from Borracho. Stay tuned.
.420 Radio, turning red states and blue states green.
The Green Cross has been an amazing source of cannabis medicines for my pain management. Whether I need edibles or tinctures or topicals, I'm able to combine the 2 or 3 to give me really successful pain control.
It's the delivery service that Green Cross provides is just incredible. You get your medicine and it's delivered by a person that you trust.
Whether we come to you or you come to us, the Green Cross delivers.
NORMAL stands for Responsible Adult Cannabis Use. If cannabis use is causing problems in your life, consider taking a break or seeking medical assistance. Consider ceasing cannabis use if you have a family history of mental illness. Don't drive or operate heavy machinery while impaired by cannabis use. Cannabis use is not without risks, even though the risks are far less than those posed by legal drugs.
Georgia. Hi, this is Willie Nelson. Alcohol prohibition didn't work in the 1920s, and marijuana prohibition isn't working today. It's time we stopped arresting responsible marijuana smokers. It's the fair thing to do.
For more information, contact NORMAL, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Call toll-free 888-67-NORML or visit their website at norml.org.
Everyone knows music and marijuana go together, so let's wind up our 20 after break with the Russ Belville Show's Daily Toker tunes, the best in pod-safe 420 music from around the web. Today is Rockin' Friday, featuring rock, metal, and the hard edge of alternative country. Now, sit back and enjoy your Daily Toker tune.
Welcome back, everyone. Creeping up on 23 after the hour. Creeping up on the beginning of the weekend for everyone and the last day of the month as we head into Super Bowl X-Slicks Sunday. And who could get us ready for that any better than our good friend Herb Thrasher from the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. Take it away, Herb.
Big weekend. In fact, I'm calling it it's a holiday weekend. I mean, when you have the Super Bowl and 2 420 hosts' birthdays going on. I mean, I think that qualifies for a holiday weekend.
That's right. We got
let me give you a special shout out. Happy birthday to you, real quick, Russ.
And happy birthday to you on the day after I'm the day before the Super Bowl. You're the day after the Super Bowl. It's a 3-day holiday celebration.
That's it, man, and that's how I'm looking at it, and that's how we're going to roll tonight on the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour as well. Looking forward to a great show, man. We've got a jam-packed show tonight, and we're freaking starting at 8 p.m. sharp tonight with one of our big-time guests, Tad Doyle from Brothers of the Sonic Cloth. A lot of you guys might remember Tad Doyle from one of the bands out of Seattle in that whole alternative grungy scene called Tad. Opened up for Soundgarden and Alice in Chains and just Nirvana and all those bands. So looking forward to talking with Tad tonight. He's got a brand new album, brand new band, just releasing after 15 years. And actually a new kind of music, too. And so we'll get into all that with Tad Doyle tonight from Brothers of the Sonic Cloth. And then we're going to talk with Jared McGovern. He is with the Urban Pioneers, and a lot of you guys might remember Jared from Jake Orvis. He was with the Jake Orvis band for so many years as that stand-up bass player, and Liz, his girlfriend, now fiddle violinist, was also in that band, and she's with him as well. And so they're on the road playing many shows, and that's what they do these days. And he's in Portland tonight, actually playing in the northwest side of town. And so we'll update you guys on that and talk with Jared McGovern of the Urban Pioneers. And then at 9 o'clock, we have one of our faves, John Fadden of Ichabod. They released Mary Mac last year in November, and he's a big New England boy and a big fired up, big sports dude, and get an update on Ichabod, but also talk a little Super Bowl. And me and Russ and John kind of break this down and talk about the Super Bowl while Russ and I smoke Super Bowls as well. So looking forward to tonight's show, bringing us today to Rockin' Friday. And I just want to say something real quick, man. I got today's tune from a Facebook post. One of my friends, shout out to Mark from Zed, but he was just posting a band, it was just an innocent post. And so the point is, you guys support these bands, post some of these bands, post the tunes that you like, because you never know who is going to click on that and support that band as well. This is Baracho, and they are out of Washington, D.C., Rock City. And three dudes, Steve, Tim, and Mario, and they started in 2007, released a couple albums. The tune that we're going to hear today, Concentric Circles, is off their debut album, Splitting Skies, back in 2010. And they have a new album out now, Oculus, which was released here recently. And they're just rocking stages. They've played many bands with played many stages with Fu Manchu, Truck Fighters. Next week, 420 Radio is going to be at Karma to Burn show, and they've played with them as well. So many bands, they're on Facebook, and they have a Reverb page and also a cdbaby.com artist page. So you guys definitely get out there and check out Baracho. This is Concentric Circles. We'll see you tonight at 8 p.m. with the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. Turn it up, folks. Have a safe weekend, and have a great Super Bowl weekend as well. Here's Baracho. Turn it up.
I need your dignity. what you're doing, but you give up the snow. You get a wheel and you wanna reach for something more. You see the sun, but it's setting, so you reach for the sea. You break the pain and turn around, it's like you're doing to me. The same.
420 Radio. Tune in, turn on, get highly educated. The law offices of Omar Figueroa would like to remind you to stand up for your rights. If you are detained or arrested, treat law enforcement with respect and stand up for your rights by repeating, I respectfully invoke all of my legal and constitutional rights. I do not consent to any search and seizure. I want to remain silent, and I want to speak with my attorney. Please contact the law offices of Omar Figueroa at 415-489-0420 or 707-829-0215 or on the web at omarfigueroa.com.
I like it like that.
Well, I don't know what you came to do, but what we came to keep the funk alive.
That's right, baby. We're keeping the funk alive right here at Big Daddy Fink's Funky Roller Ring, your groovy home of soul, funk, and disco. So join me, Big Daddy, every Thursday night at 11 Eastern, 8 Pacific at the Funky Roller Ring, where every night is Saturday night.
Are you a hypocrite? If you live a closeted cannabis lifestyle, you are. Read about 7 people living a closeted cannabis lifestyle who are on the verge of coming out in The Hypocrites by Mara K. Eaton. Available at areyouahypocrite.net. You can purchase the book on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, also available on iTunes. Check out Mara K. Eaton on Facebook as well. Learn more at areyouahypocrite.net.
I know I've been in chains. Violent thoughts all to fill my brain. Over medication can't stop the pain.
Welcome back, everyone. 32 and a half after the hour. You're listening to Toker Talk Radio. That's music from Year of the Dragon. The song's entitled Jailbreak. Watching the video here in the studio because I'm trying to figure out what kind of bass that bass player is playing. I play a 6-string bass, and I thought his bass was a 6-string there, but it looked like it had 3 pegs for the low strings, and then for the high strings, the 3 high strings, it almost looked like it was double pegged, like you have on a 12-string guitar where they have 2 strings per string. I gotta get a good shot of that one of these times and freeze frame it and see what it is. But that looked pretty cool. Gotta get me one of them basses. All right, so before we went to the 20 after break, we were talking about Jacob Sullum's story concerning the Kettle Falls Five, the 5 medical marijuana patients in the state of Washington who are undergoing a federal trial February 23rd that could put them each behind bars for 10 years. And of course, in the federal trial, they are forbidden, their defense is forbidden for mentioning they are medical patients, that any of them are sick, that they're using marijuana to treat medical conditions, that there is a state medical marijuana law, that they were compliant with the state medical marijuana law. They can't even mention the federal mandatory minimum sentences these people are facing if they get convicted. You know, because in our courts of law, we want to have the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, right? No, folks. It's not the whole truth by any stretch of the imagination. It's the truth the federal prosecutors and the federal system want the jury to hear. And it's just crazy to be going after these people. You know, generally speaking, when the feds want to go after someone for marijuana cultivation, they want 100 plants or more. 100 plants is when you trigger that 5-year mandatory minimum. These people were caught growing 74 plants. And so you'd think, well, okay, 74 less than 100, what's the deal here, right? The prosecutors inferred from their 174 plant grow that they must have been growing previous times as well, and that would put them over 100. Really, folks? Really? These people are being prosecuted because one grow proves somehow they had other grows. And those other grows had to have been above 26 plants to trigger the 100 plant minimum. Now, I'm not shocked by this because I've heard this before. I remember covering the case of Dr. Molly Fry and Dale Schaefer, the Cool Madness story out in Cool, California, also medical growers. She's a breast cancer survivor. He's a hemophiliac. They were very careful to grow small plots so that they were always within the California presumptive limits. And the prosecutors went and added up like 5 of their harvests to get the numbers above 100. So these kind of shenanigans go on all the time. Let me continue on with the second part of Jacob Sullum's story on this. Although it seems mindlessly vindictive, such charge stacking, and he's referring to the fact that they're charging them with, let's see if we can get the, what were the charges here? They're being charged with, here we go, the cultivation, 5-year mandatory minimum, the fact that they had guns, which means firearms in furtherance of a drug trafficking crime, that's another 5 years consecutive, and 3 other charges: conspiracy to grow marijuana, distributing marijuana, and maintaining a place for marijuana could make that even longer. And although it seems mindlessly vindictive, such charge stacking is standard operating procedure for prosecutors after a defendant turns down a plea deal. Last year, the Kettle Falls Five rejected a deal that would have guaranteed them sentences of no more than 3 years. So you have a situation here where the government's punishing these people for not admitting guilt when they believe they're innocent. Quote, "The family is convinced that they haven't done anything wrong," says Phil Telfayan, a lawyer who represents Roland Gregg. "So pleading guilty to any federal felony is out of the question. They are good, law-abiding citizens. Why would they go to prison for a year or even a month?" End quote. The original indictment included an additional count of possessing marijuana with the intent to distribute it, but prosecutors dropped that charge, possibly because raising the issue of intent would have invited rebuttal testimony about medical use. Quote, "They removed that charge so they could hide from the jury the medical marijuana recommendations that all 5 of these individuals had," Telfayan says. "I think the DOJ was worried that when you have an intent to distribute charge, motive becomes relevant. Why were these people growing marijuana? They don't want the jury to hear the truth." End quote. So they're willing to stack every charge they can against them to put them behind bars as long as possible, except for this one that might bring up the fact that, oh yeah, they really shouldn't be prosecuted for this. Sullum continues. Despite repeated assurances from Attorney General Holder and Deputy Cole that they are not interested in targeting medical marijuana users, prosecutors seem determined to see the case through, unswayed even by the news that Larry Harvey has been diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. Quote, "You have got a family that's dealing with something very, very difficult in their lives. They're also facing a minimum 10-year prison sentence for doing something that is not illegal under state law," says Telfayan. "DOJ enforcement priorities at the top level should set guidance, but on the ground, individual prosecutors end up having a ton of discretion." End quote. Assuming there is no last-minute change of heart at Ormsby's office, U.S. District Judge Thomas Rice can prevent a trial if he decides a new congressional edict requires that result. The omnibus appropriations bill enacted by Congress last month includes a rider that tells the Justice Department it may not spend money to prevent states from implementing their medical marijuana laws. One could argue that the Kettle Falls Five case does not have that effect, since it does not stop Washington from making medical exceptions to its own marijuana laws. But in motions for dismissal filed last week, lawyers for the defendants argue that prosecutions like this one prevent Washington from fully implementing its law. Quote, Prosecuting persons who may be operating in compliance with state medical marijuana laws prevents states from implementing their own laws in at least 3 ways, writes Robert Fisher, a federal public defendant who represents Larry Harvey. Fisher argues that such prosecutions create uncertainty about whether patients will be able to obtain their medicine. Quote, take away Washington's authority to determine for itself whether someone is in compliance with its laws, end quote, and deny the medical value that Congress acknowledged by approving the spending restriction. Fisher also notes that during the House debate over the rider, both supporters and opponents said it would bar prosecution of patients who grow marijuana for their own medical use. Even if federal prosecutors doubt that the Kettle Falls Five were complying with state law, Telfayan argues in a separate motion it is not their job to make that call. Congress has told the Justice Department it must let Washington implement its medical marijuana law, which necessarily includes determining who is complying with it. Quote, DOJ's attempt to decide which Washington businesses and citizens violate state law and which do not inserts the federal government into the business of interpreting state law, resulting in disastrous consequences for the authority of local communities, he writes. Such interpretation of state law by the DOJ is exactly what Congress has prevented in Section 538 of the Appropriations Act, end quote. In response, filed on Thursday, prosecutors argue that the Kettle Falls Five exceeded Washington's limit on collective gardens, which are allowed no more than 45 plants under a 2011 provision explicitly authorizing such operations for the purposes of producing, processing, transporting, and delivering cannabis for medical use. Time out for just a second. The defense lawyer said that the DOJ would be sticking its nose into determining who is complying with state law. And the Fed's response is, hey, these guys weren't complying with state law. Thanks for making our point. It's not your gig to decide if they were a collective or if they were individual patients. That's Washington's gig. Sullum continues. But the Harveys never claimed to be relying on that provision. Instead, they looked to the affirmative defense that patients had for home cultivation since 1999 when Washington's medical marijuana initiative took effect. The default limit for that is 15 plants per patient. Even if we assume that 5 patients growing gardens together in one place must comply with the rules for a collective garden, which is not what the law says, that does not mean federal prosecution is appropriate. After deputies from the Stevens County Sheriff's Department found 74 plants on the Harveys' property in August of 2012, they consulted with the local prosecuting attorney, who advised them to treat the grow as a collective garden. The deputies therefore confiscated 29 plants, bringing the total down to 45, which they had been advised was the legal limit. They did not arrest the Harveys, who have never faced local charges. As far as local officials were concerned, they were now complying with state law, and that was that. The feds took a different view. According to Fisher and Telfayan, this is precisely the sort of second-guessing that Congress sought to prevent by telling the Justice Department not to interfere with state medical marijuana laws. Telfayan is not very hopeful that Judge Rice, who worked in the office that is prosecuting the Kettle Falls Five from 1987, the year he graduated from law school, until he was appointed to the federal bench in 2012, not convinced that he will be sympathetic to the argument that the medical marijuana rider compels the Justice Department to drop the case. Assuming the trial proceeds as planned next month, Telfayan says, quote, I am hoping that jurors will notice something's not right here. That they will wonder, whenever Rice stops the defense from eliciting testimony about the defendant's motivation for growing marijuana, why are the defense attorneys being cut off? End quote. Even if jurors surmise what is going on, that does not necessarily mean that they will vote to acquit. Polling shoppers at a local mall, Telfayan found that many thought prosecuting marijuana growers was ridiculous, especially given the current reality of a state-licensed, federally tolerated cannabis industry. But most of the people he buttonholed said they would nevertheless feel obligated as federal jurors to vote guilty if the defendants had in fact grown marijuana. Then again, Telfayan says we actually need just one juror to feel convinced that they should vote not guilty. If the jury is hung in this case, the DOJ is going to have a really hard time justifying a retrial. That's Jacob Sullum in the Forbes magazine. I'll give you that link in our chat room here if you want to comment on that story or share it with others. It's very, very important story. And this idea, this is one thing that's really criminal in our system. You know, aside from this whole trial, it's criminal. But one sad thing in America is that we educate our kids in this public education system that gives them no clue what their rights are. No clue. Most people think when the judge says to you on the jury, your job is to be an impartial trier of law, to determine the facts of the case, and to render a verdict of guilty or not guilty based on the facts of the case and the written law. Folks, it ain't true. It's your primary job as a juror, ascertain facts, determine guilt or innocence, sure. But a core principle of jury trials is that the jury also gets to hold the law itself on trial. A juror may vote not guilty if that juror truly believes that the conviction in such a case would be unjust, regardless of the facts in the case. Nobody's denying these folks broke federal law. Under the letter of the law, they had marijuana plants. Even one is federally illegal. But would busting them for this be just? Would it be just in the context of the federal government allowing a marijuana industry, growers that are growing 10,000 plants for sale, and instead choosing to pick on the guy with pancreatic cancer and his family? There's no justice there. And as a juror, you can vote to acquit regardless of the facts in the case. Regardless. They can have it on videotape. They can have the plants in their hands. They can have 100 people get on the stand and tell you how this guy grew marijuana. And you as a juror can say, so effing what? Not guilty. Learn more about this. Fully Informed Jury Association, FIJA.org. Now, when you hear about this, a lot of people, I've told people about jury nullification before, and they'll say, well, gosh, we ought to tell all the jurors that. Well, folks, in most states you can't. I believe, and I may be mistaken, but I believe New Hampshire is the only state where a defense attorney can actually inform the jury that there is such a thing as jury nullification. The only state in which they can tell jurors they actually have a right that dates back prior to the Constitution, dates back to English common law, to nullify the law. That we all have that right and power. Now, only one state allows a defense attorney to tell the jury that. In all the other states, a defense attorney even starts saying the word nulla, and bam, he's out, man. That's contempt of court, mistrial. So you think, well, maybe we'll just tell people outside the courthouse. No, they've cracked down on that too. If you're anywhere near the courthouse steps, there's been cases where people trying to pass out leaflets for Fully Informed Jury Association or hold signs have been held. So this is one area of the law. You know, so many things that I wish like I could just telepathically implant into young people's minds. One of them is you don't have to consent to a search, that consenting to a search does not give anyone probable cause. Another one is you don't have to open the door for a cop in your home unless he's got a warrant. Another one is you don't have to talk to a cop. Another one is you can't lie to a cop, but they can lie to you. But right up there in that list is that you as a juror have the right to nullify the law. You can vote to acquit regardless of anything else.
And now, a message from former President George W. Bush to remind the American people of our responsibility in our nation's war on certain American citizens using non-pharmaceutical, non-alcoholic, tobacco-free drugs.
One major responsibility is to encourage people to use less drugs.
That's right, America, use less drugs. Put down the Prozac, the Vioxx, and the Levitra, and turn to the herb. Use less drugs. Our national policy is no longer just say no, it's now just slow down.
You get me too high. I overanalyze. If you've ever been too high, then you can sympathize. You get me too high. And I start to fly if I said some silly thing, and that's the reason why.
420 Radio, the world's voice of marijuana legalization. Are you in the market for portable vaporizers now? Get online to vapes.buzz, the quick and easy link to portablevaporizers.now.com. Vapes.buzz has everything you're looking for, including vape pens, herbal vaporizers, e-juice, parts, accessories, and more. Visit vapes.buzz and save 5% instantly, or give them a call at 866-264-2415. Vapes.buzz. Get vaping, baby!
There's so much I worry about as a mom. Stephen Harper thinks that organized crime should continue to profit from marijuana prohibition. Imagine regulating marijuana like alcohol and cigarettes with a strong and clear educational message, making it more difficult for my kids and your kids to access. Drug dealers don't ask for ID. Stephen Harper does not have the kind of judgment we need to protect our children, authorized by the Normal Women's Alliance of Canada.
Adam Hand of Handmade Apparel produces quality custom designs for t-shirts, hats, and other apparel. Handmade Apparel is the official design shop for 420 Radio, among many clients who rely on Adam Hand for everything from short-run custom projects to full-run clothing lines. Visit handmadeapparel.biz to browse the selection of handmade gear or to get a personal quote for your own designs. Handmade Apparel, a proud supporter of 420.
Well, the seasons come and the seasons go, and the reasons you left, guess I'll never know. There will be others, yes, I know it's true, but they won't do you like I did for you.
Welcome back, everyone. 52 and a half after the hour. That's the Del McCoury Band with My Love Will Not Change. We also play that kind of music on the Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. Herb's all about guys that thrash on stringed instruments. Doesn't have to be electric. Some great bluegrass there. Make sure you join us 8 p.m. tonight. Herb Thrasher Flower Hour. Got 3 different guests joining us. Going to be a real good time. We'll play some real good music as well. As we wind up here, this final segment of the week on the Russ Belville Show, wanted to give you an update on a story we covered earlier this week. We talked about how Colorado has the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. They call it TABOR. Taxpayer Bill of Rights. And it's this law in Colorado that prevents the state from taking in too much tax money. Because that's like a problem or something, I guess. So the state, if it takes in too much tax money, it has to refund some of it back to the citizens. And we reported on the news that TABOR may require the state of Colorado to refund some of the 50 or 60 million in tax money that they recovered from marijuana taxes. Well, now we've actually got some numbers. According to the Associated Press, the legalization has been so successful in Colorado that every adult in Colorado is going to receive a refund of $7.63. $7.63. My gosh, you could almost buy a half gram of Denver weed for that, right? That'd be a bowl, be a joint, right? But here's the part that bothers me a little bit about this. Just a tiny bit. Everybody gets that refund. Not everybody spent marijuana taxes. So a guy who goes and buys an ounce a month and paid those 15% excise and 10% sales taxes, or vice versa, whichever way it is, right? Guy who paid all that tax money in is only getting $7.63 back. And Governor Hickenlooper, a millionaire who drinks beer and hates pot, he gets $7.63 back too. That kind of sucks, doesn't it? There's no practical way, I suppose, to refund the tax money only to the people who bought pot, which would be fair, right? But no practical way to do that. And $7.63 isn't enough for some pot hater in Colorado Springs or Fort Collins to think, well, all right, that pot's not so bad. That sent me $400, right? Now, $7.63, nobody's even going to notice it. But if that money had just gone back to the people who smoke pot, well, let's do the math. 12% of the adults in Colorado, 13% smoke pot, something like that. So 1 out of 8. So multiply that 763 times 8, you're talking $60 or so that you're going to get back. That's a little nicer if it was just distributed amongst the pot smokers. Anyway, regardless of all that, the best part of this is the framing of the issue. The idea that marijuana legalization was so successful they have to refund some of the tax money. Because one of the talking points of our opponents is that the Colorado tax revenues were way lower than what were predicted. Way lower than what were predicted. Oh, okay. That's kind of a glass half empty look at it. The glass half full look would be Colorado tax revenues for marijuana are up by infinity. Since it was zero before, right? Went from zero to something. But no, they got to try to put a spin on it. So, they predicted 70 and they only got 40 or whatever the hell the numbers are. Well, this kind of tells me that even had those numbers been up to what the predictions were, they'd had to give more back. I'm not exactly sure how the equation works, but I think that's the way it would work, wouldn't it? All right, some other stuff. Of course, this weekend is the Super Bowl X-Licks. And we got the Seattle Heartbreakers versus the New England Cheaters. And I read a great piece on Rolling Stone today about the NFL. And it was kind of pointing out how, what a terrible year this has been. To quote Charles Barkley, terrible year this has been for the NFL with the Ray Rice incident and the concussions issue that keeps coming up and the domestic violence and all the, and the marijuana suspensions, all these things that are happening. And lately, the latest one, the Deflate Gate, whether or not the balls were properly inflated. And, it's just kind of, it made a point of how the NFL makes this huge deal over Marshawn Lynch if he's not going to talk to the press, or if he wears gold shoes or a beast mode hat. Got to come down hard on that. Josh Gordon, he smokes a little weed or drinks a couple of drinks on a flight to Vegas. Got to come down hard on that. But, domestic abuse, drunk driving, assault, not such a big deal. Well, we shall see how the Super Bowl turns out. I've got my only hope for the Super Bowl is a humiliating blowout. I don't care which way. Either the Seattle Seahawks get their ass whooped, like old school, whooped, or the Patriots get their ass old school whooped. I'm good with either of them. I just want either team, because I don't like either team. So I would be most pleased if either one of them were embarrassingly humiliated. So the embarrassing humiliation of the Green Bay Packers would be last week's news. And my prediction for the humiliating blowout score? Well, what did you think, folks? 42-0. That's all the time we got for today. Join us at 8 for Herb Thrasher. I'm Radical Russ. Until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
This is the Russ Belville Show. The Russ Belville Show is blogging and podcasting daily at radicalruss.com.
You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it.